Welcome on to this edition of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. It's great to have you with us. My name is Brad Nadauld. We've got the coach, Lindsey, Parry, with us once again. And today we are going to be talking about the difficulty that comes with running slowly and not affecting your running form. We're going to be talking about strides, how to hit a marathon time that you've really been struggling to hit. We're going to talk about a very unpleasant topic, runners, trots, and we'll be looking at some motivation when it comes to running as well. Linz, nice to catch up once again. I hope all is going well on your side. Let's jump straight into things. I know we do a lot of small talk on these podcasts sometimes, but you're under time pressure. I'm under time pressure. We've got to get this thing out. So let's jump straight into the first one. From Teresa in Durban, she says, I'm a 52-year-old female runner who's been running competitively since the age of 14. I'm trying to still run slower on my easy runs, but it's actually physically difficult. My heart rate's often in zone 3 or 4 for easy runs, but it feels fine, and my breath is not labored. What is your advice on how to make going slower not change your running form and feel like plodding?
Yeah, so look, it's quite an involved answer, this one, Brad. And I need to answer it carefully because I don't want to be just giving people permission to run too hard. But as we get older, we do definitely run at a slightly higher percentage of max, not quite threshold. Threshold is actually a better tool to use as we get older for that exact reason. But I think the important thing here is accuracy of data. I think that's kind of where I'm trying to go to here, and setting your zones up properly. So the fact that she's feeling absolutely fine and it doesn't feel like she's breathless and it feels like she can hold a conversation, those are all clues that she may well be running easy enough. And what we would look to do is to make sure that we've got a fairly accurate threshold heart rate, because once we have that threshold heart rate, we can then set up more accurate training zones. So, to the larger or broader question, because this is something that many runners struggle with, is that when you've been running a certain way and a certain pace for month after month, year after year, decade after decade, it does become difficult to change that up. And as we get older, there is no question that we do need at some point to be slowing down. Otherwise, we run too hard and then we actually accelerate our decline. And so by slowing down and running in the right place, we can slow down the slowing down and in some instances actually maintain that race pace much better for a much longer period of time. So we want to make sure the data is accurate, because if the data is accurate, then we know we're actually doing the session we think we are doing. And then a couple of tricks. How do I slow down when it is so uncomfortable to slow down, so foreign? And in many cases, people have like this perceived increase in effort. And I think that perceived increase in effort is probably more strongly linked to being forced to be more in the present. So when you run and you get fit, you just run. And often 15, 20 minutes can go by and I can hardly remember what I thought about in those 20 minutes. But then when you're unfit, you never go even a kilometer without being like completely immersed in what's going on. And so I think sometimes it's that focus on what you're doing rather than the fact that it's actually physically harder to run slow. So, what are those tricks? So, the first and easiest trick is actually just to throw in a very short walk break every 2 to 3 kilometers. Now, in this case, that's not going to be received well. Um, Running at elite level since you're 14 years old, that's a difficult thing to do. But it's a super easy way just to make sure that you keep yourself in that training zone. Okay. So short, regular walk breaks is like a really cool trick. And then the other way of doing it without upsetting the biomechanics is really just focusing on shortening the stride. So really making a conscious effort to keep everything else the same, but shortening the stride slightly. And with the running experience, if you've been running for a long time, that little change will take 3 or 4 runs before it will start to feel quite natural, and your biomechanics then won't be upset too much. And when you watch like truly elite runners, like that are the top South African runners, like a Stephen McCorker who's winning on the top end, when you watch them warm up do their session, recover, and then cool down. When you watch them, the single biggest noticeable change is just how their stride length goes from being shorter than their feet to being like twice their body length. Okay. It's quite wild to watch that.
Mm.
And then there are also changes in their stride frequency, but the biggest change is literally in that stride length. So that's the thing that you want to focus on changing. Um, and when you shorten the stride length, you don't want to increase stride frequency. Otherwise, all you're going to be doing is running the same speed with a higher RPM.
Yeah, Lindsey, it's funny. Like, I don't know if I told you this or if we spoke about it on the podcast, but a few weeks ago, I ran my local park run. And there was a youngster there, and he's obviously been watching all the YouTube videos, but not ours, because this isn't stuff we generally speak about. But he had everything. He had the nasal dilating strip, and he was obviously there with I don't know if it was his girlfriend or if it was his want-to-be girlfriend, because he was obviously trying to impress her, and he was giving her advice because he's obviously listened to lots of podcasts, watched lots of YouTube videos. And I was watching this guy, and they were running my pace, please, and I'm not fast, so like I definitely wasn't smashing it. But he was like overstriding, but trying to run slow at the same time, and it just looked so uncomfortable. And it's often we get this number in our head or the way it should look and feel, and when you try and slow it down, it just does not work. And as you said, it's amazing watching those elite athletes, the way they almost shuffle when they're doing their easy runs, but how they can actually just open it up, and that stride length just magically opens up when they are going hard. And it's not all going to look and feel exactly the same. That's, I think, one of the things we have to do, realize.
Absolutely. And this kind of layer of sub-elite or very serious amateur runners, of which I consider myself, we do not have nearly as broad a range. You know, we've got the what I call comfortably hard, and that's our staple. And then we obviously do our very hard workouts. But yeah, there's just a much bigger range when you watch these Kenyans and Ethiopians training. It's very different.
Yeah, I wish I'd taken a video of this poor guy, because he definitely wasn't doing himself any favors. We need to definitely work on his form if he is trying to impress the young lass that he took to the park run. That is for sure. All right, next question is from Mark in New Zealand. It's not a pleasant one, but it's something we all struggle with at some stage in our running journey. He says, I really struggle with stomach issues during my runs, what people often call runners trots. It doesn't happen every time, which I guess is probably one of the frustrating things too, Lindsey. But often enough, it's the starting of it. It's starting to worry me, especially about on race day. Are there any strategies to prevent this, or things I should be doing differently with my food, hydration, or timing before runs to avoid it?
Yeah, so that all of those things are important, and actually the only way to figure this out is by keeping a record. So you really do want to keep an accurate diary so that you know
I nearly
what you
said keep a
did.
log, but that wouldn't be good, would it?
No,
Maybe.
that's we won't get into what happened to me on a webinar once, but
Sorry to interrupt.
that would have been right up there with that one. Yes. So no, but that's why you need to. You know, for a lot of people, they never have this GR stress, so it doesn't matter. But in this case, it's a classic case of we've got to keep a record, because we've got to figure out when it happens. We've got to have the data so that we can start seeing if there's a common theme there. Is it the timing? Is it what you are taking in, and is it the proximity to your run that you're taking in? So we should always try and have a small something before we go out and exercise. And that's often very impractical, because you've got to wake up earlier. So if you got to eat something before you train, I mean, the ideal window is 2 to 3 hours. So you're going to wake up 2 to 3 hours before you train. You're not going to, but certainly maybe half an hour, and then like, maybe half a banana, maybe it's half a slice of toast, maybe it's a biscotti slash rusk. Um, Maybe it's a glass of juice, maybe it's an energy drink, but I would certainly aim to be having something within that first half an hour of exercise. And definitely on the long runs, on the weekends, that's probably the time where your timing is a little bit more forgiving and you can figure it out. On race day, what do you want to try and do on race day? You want to try and put something in your stomach 2 to 3 hours before, and then very slowly sip on an energy drink or something similar to keep you both hydrated and just keep your energy up until the start of the race. But really, the most important thing here is and that food diary from the night before too. So if you generally run in the mornings, also keep that diary of what you're eating the night before, because often what you're eating the night before can have an impact. In my case, beer. So if I have 2 beers the night before, then I know I have to pick a run that is going to involve a bathroom, because somewhere on the run I'm going to have to go to the bathroom, whether I get to go before or not. And with that in mind, often if I do have time between waking up and going for a run, if I wake up immediately and have a nice glass of water, a coffee, and a small something to eat, then you can get your stomach to do what it needs to do before you actually go out and run, and then it's not something that you need to worry about. Having said all of this, lots of people suffer from runner's trots, and essentially the basic mechanism for it, quite simply, is that there is something in the small intestine, and we start exercising and the blood is diverted from the gut. And it's actually that, with no blood in the gut and the gut's inability to absorb those foods now because it's been diverted, it just sits in the intestine and irritates it. And your body's like, nah, let's get rid of this. So you often doing like a gentle warm up and easing your way into that run, making sure that you are taking in fluids while you are exercising, experimenting with different types of gels to see, and foods, solid foods often, and energy drinks, to see what are the things that generally cause more or less irritation. And for people who literally struggle to take in anything, one of the things that I've had success with is to have either tiny sweets or just plain old glucose tablets that you can buy at the pharmacy, and you just pop one of those every couple of minutes under your tongue, let it dissolve, and get into the system. And then, as a very last resort, certainly on race day, but you have to try this out before. Like, this is one of those things that has worked for clients, it does not work for me. So you have to try it out, and that is half an Imodium, or a whole Imodium, but literally something that just then stops your stomach from working. If I do it, it stops me from absorbing anything. So then, fine, I don't go to the bathroom, but I can't eat or drink anything. It's like I get full, and everything gets stuck here. So it doesn't work for everybody, but if it's something that persists and it can give you a bit of peace of mind on race day, experiment with that on long runs.
Yeah, Lindsay, and I also don't think, especially if it only happens in races, I also don't think you can discount the effect of nerves. I mean, nerves, obviously, and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
anxiety often also play a big part, especially if
Mm.
in training you fine, but then on race day it flares up.
Yeah, 100%. But often on race day, look, anxiety plays a big role on race day. But for most of us, the anxiety peaks before the race, and so it happens before the race. Um, that actually reminds me of an incredibly funny story. About 5 years ago, I ran a race called the RAC Tough One. It's a 32K race, and it's called the Tough One because there's only 1 kilometer that's not tough. Okay, so it's a really hard race. Um, but anyway, I got there and people were like, no one was going near one of the portaloos, and I was like, why is no one using that? The oak said, no, it's disgusting in there. And I went in there and it was pretty foul, and I used it and I came out, and everyone turned to look at me, and I said, guys, there's space for one more. And I ran off. But no, so anxiety, absolutely a cause. And then often on race day, people will do things like eat when they never eat in
Yeah.
training, or they'll take a caffeine gel
Nutrition.
before they race, or
Yeah.
coffee when they normally have that after they run. So you're absolutely right that the change in routine often trips people up on race day. So don't do things on race day that you haven't done in training.
Yeah. And this next question sort of leads us into very similar situation. Don't forget, if you have a question that you would like answered, all you need to do is click on the link that's in the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's below the video. If you're listening on whatever podcast player you're listening, the link is there in the show notes. Just click through, leave your question. We do filter the video question to the top of that list. So if you want to jump the queue, we do have lots of questions. So if you want to jump the queue, make sure you pop it in on video. This one's coming in from Laura, who's in the United States. She said, "Hi, Coach Parry. I've been training really well for the past 2 weeks and have a half marathon coming up that I want to do well in. But right now, I'm feeling really unmotivated and a bit overwhelmed. I've also told lots of people about my race to keep me accountable. And now I feel like the pressure is building. And instead of helping me, it's making me want to run for the hills." If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsey and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
The good news in this question is that we're 2 weeks away from the race. So being a little bit demotivated and not getting out for your training sessions is okay because it's not going to impact on race day. But of course, racing takes a high degree of motivation because it hurts. So you need to kind of feel like you want to be there. And honestly, I always tell people if you really want to run your time, you have to be desperate to run your time because the last quarter, whether you're doing a 5K, 10K, half marathon, or an ultra marathon, the last quarter is where the work sets in, and you've got to want it to override the levels of discomfort that you're feeling. So I think, look, we all respond differently to pressure, and I think in this particular instance, it feels like you've created too much pressure, and the fear of failure is actually overwhelming now. It's like, well, can I do this? Am I going to do this? Do I want to do this? Oh, but everybody's expecting me to do this, and that can become overwhelming. So it's not easy, but what you've got to try and do is focus on why you wanted to do it in the first place, what is important to you about that goal, and then try and almost create a mantra for yourself around that so that every time you get overwhelmed, you can fall back on that mantra, which is the how and the why. And then sit down and work out a plan of how you're going to execute this goal. And also, when you become anxious and overwhelmed, just focus on that execution, step 1, 2, 3, 4, and how you're going to get to that actual end goal. And then one of the things that I find often with people is when they train really hard, they expect it to be easy. And the one thing that I can tell you about running is that it doesn't get easier, you get better. Obviously, your easy runs start to feel more comfortable, and there are definitely signs of fitness. But on race day, the discomfort doesn't improve. The discomfort just happens at a much faster clip, and that is motivating. So that I find when I set out in a race, I always feel the same. But how the race unfolds very much depends on what my watch tells me in kilometer 1, 2, and 3. Because if 1, 2, and 3 are what I was expecting to run, I feel highly motivated and I can go for it. And if kilometer 1, 2, and 3 are behind what I was hoping to be running, it does get mentally challenging on race day. That is the truth. But honestly, just knowing what you want to achieve, why you want to achieve it, and how you're going to go through it, that stuff allows you to get into a much more positive loop. And then on race day, just don't be surprised by how hard it is to achieve your goal. Okay. That is going to come. And I've watched that trip a lot of athletes up where they just like expected it to feel like, oh, well, that it was going to be a walk in the park, and that's not going to be the case. In terms of getting through the training as a general rule, where this sort of overwhelm comes and you feel the pressure and you're struggling, then you've got to use little tricks like having a look at your training and seeing how far you've come. having a look at what you want to do, why you want to do it, and what you need to do to get there. Involving other people in the process, but not in the way of shouting it out and getting. I mean, if your personality responds well to that, fine. But for a lot of people, that can be overwhelming. But get people involved with a similar vested interest, training partners, family members, people that are pulling for you but not putting pressure on you. Those kind of things. And then having training partners is honestly one of the best ways you can do this. Just having someone that can drag you. I mean, I failed this morning. Let me tell everybody, I failed this morning. I set my alarm, it went off. I had a bit of a dry throat, and my daughter and wife are actually sick. And I was like, oh boy, I'm getting sick. I don't think I should wake up now. I went back to sleep and woke up an hour and a half later and realized there is nothing wrong with me. That was a convenience. So I failed this morning. But then I unexpectedly got a little gap in my day, and I took advantage and I went, and now I don't have the guilt of not having done my run. But that's what I really want to say, is that sometimes then there's an associated guilt, and the guilt works a little bit, but it also just adds to the overwhelm. Okay.
Yeah.
So having someone that you're going to meet is often just an easy way to get that first 6-7 minutes of your morning going. Because once that's going and you're actually moving around, very few of us are like, oh, then we are going. And 10 minutes into our run, we 9 times out of 10 are just relieved that we are out there. So it's really just creating tricks that get you through that first 7 minutes, and don't let a thirst from a dry throat thirst stop you from getting up and going for your run.
Great question, Laura. Thank you so much for that. Lindsey, question from Mark. Mark is in Perth in Australia. And he said, hey, coach, I'm training for my first marathon, and I'm wondering, how do I know if I'm running my easy runs too fast? It's probably the question we get asked the most here at CoachParry.com. He says, sometimes I feel good and want to push the pace, but I'm worried that I might be sabotaging my training if I do that.
Look, that's where metrics are handy. Okay. When you are unsure, then metrics are great because they tell you this is where I need to train. So having accurate heart rate data is the easiest way to control your easy runs. It's not perfect for long runs because we start to get something called cardiac drift, and that is in response to either being in a warm environment or just plain old sweating and a drop in blood volume. So we've got less blood volume, so our heart beats a little bit faster to do the same amount of work. But you can still use that heart rate to set the tone for the first hour, and then you know what it feels like and you carry on running. So that's really the easiest tool for you to use. But it does rely on having accurate reading and also calculating a threshold heart rate so that you can actually set those zones up properly. We've said it many times. Can you hold a conversation? So when you're very fit, you can often run and have a flat out conversation and think you're running easy enough, but the next day you'll feel like, oh, my legs are a little bit tired. So again, always take note of how do I feel? How am I tracking? How things going on? Because I don't want this buildup of cumulative fatigue. You can run in your zone 2 aerobic zone, but right near the top end, almost in zone 3, it feels good. You feel like you're getting fit. But when you do that for 2 or 3 days in a row, you start to get this cumulative fatigue. And so that's why you kind of want to take stock. How am I feeling today? How are my legs? Are my legs a 6 out of 10? That probably means that I've been doing my easy runs too hard. Are my legs an 8 out of 10? Boom, that probably means I'm getting my easy runs easy enough. So those are kind of tools and tricks you can use. But heart rate, it's just a great way. Then you're in the right zone.
Absolutely. Great question, Mark. Thank you so much for that. And then, Lindsey, question from Lisa. Lisa is desperate. You said you need to be desperate enough to reach your goal in an earlier answer, but Lisa is desperate to run a sub 4:24 marathon. She has been training her socks off. She's 55 years old. She says, I do strength training 3 times a week. She does 2 sessions of Pilates a week, 2 speed sessions, 1 hill repeat, and 1 long run, and I still can't dip below 4:24. Please, some advice.
Yeah, look, I I was getting tired reading that question when I was prepping for the call. So, yeah, I mean, you're just doing too much and you're doing way too much hard stuff. So, yeah, just very high level first. Most people cannot sustain 2 high intensity sessions a week. So 3 is just utter insanity for a non-elite athlete. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that not even elite athletes can sustain more than 20, 22, 23% at absolute most of their total training volume at high intensity. And so if you're doing that many high intensity sessions, I mean, you're probably pretty close to, well, you're certainly north of 50%. Let me not even guess, but you're certainly north of 50% of your training is done at a high intensity. So that's absolutely not sustainable. You're going to be very, very tired. So just that's the higher level answer, is that you have to optimize your training time much better. Sounds to me like you've got plenty of time to train. And so then it becomes about making sure that 80 to 85% of all your training volume is done really, really easy, and that 15 to 20% of your training volume is done at a variety of intensities with a maximum of 2 hard sessions a week. And given the time that you are targeting, I would say that doing more than 1 high intensity session a week is going to be difficult for you to sustain. And you're going to do much better by doing 1 high intensity training session a week. Onto the strength training, which obviously we harp on about, and it's so absolutely critical. But I kind of feel like 5 days a week, from a performance point of view, 5 days a week is probably too much. So I would probably drop one of those strength sessions and do 2 strength, 2 Pilates. And then again, it would also depend on just how hard that Pilates is, because you get so many forms of Pilates. And if you're working really hard in Pilates, then actually maybe it can be 2 strengths, 1 Pilates, or 2 Pilates and 1 strength. So those are the that's when you start getting into the nuts and bolts there, Brad. But yeah, definitely need to have a relook at the strength training and the intensity thereof and the frequency thereof, and then 100% just overdoing the high intensity. And that does 2 things. It makes you tired all the time, but it also compromises your aerobic capacity. Okay. So your aerobic power is the most oxygen you can use in a given period of time. Your aerobic capacity is how strong and robust that aerobic system is. And to improve that and to give you the capacity to run fast for anything that's longer than 3 minutes. But so 5Ks, 10Ks, certainly the marathon, we have to develop that. And to develop that, we have to run at the right intensity, and we have to do lots of training at the right intensity, because that's what stimulates it. Okay. By doing lots of training at high intensity, you actually stunt that development. There's an argument that says, like, if you train hard enough but allow the recovery in between, yes, that pushes up that power, that ability to hit, and it can improve VO2 max, but it does not improve our aerobic ability. You have to do lots of higher volume, lower intensity work, and then you complement that with lower volume, high intensity work. And so you have to change the distribution of your training and figure out the strength training, and then you will run the time that you're targeting.
Yeah, Lindsey, and it's also a mindset thing, and this might not be the case in this situation, but we see it so often as well, that there's this sort of thing that it's like the no pain, no gain, that you have to be going as hard as you can in every single session to try and improve. If you're not bleeding through the eyeballs and not running 7 days a week, then you're not getting better. And people, it took me, I've been in business with you for well over a decade, and it probably took me 5 years after speaking to you almost every day about this stuff for the penny to drop that we don't actually get stronger in the session we're doing. When we're bleeding through the eyeballs, it's the recovery after that session. And when you're training as much as Elisa's training, in this case, there's no time for recovery. All you're doing is just adding and adding and adding and adding. So that could be playing into it as well. But that's just my 2 cents worth as an observer. Yeah,
You're
so
right.
there you go.
No, you're
That's it.
absolutely right. I mean, besides getting the distribution right, and that's part of getting the distribution right,
Yep.
is making sure that you are recovering.
Especially as we get older, because it becomes more and more important in our 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. So, Lindsey, as always, great to catch up. Thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions. Don't forget, if you have a question you'd like answered, you can click on the link in the description or the show notes, depending if you're watching this on YouTube or listening on whatever your favorite podcast player is. And we mentioned this a while ago, but I still am floored that only 25% of people who actually watch and listen to this podcast are subscribed to this podcast. So if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button, whatever platform you're on. While you're at it, you can also leave us a review and a rating. It really does help us get in front of more people and help more people just like you on their running journey. So if you'd like to give something back, more than welcome to do that. We really do appreciate it. From myself, Brad Nadauld, and the coach, Lindsey Parry, it's cheers.